Hello, everyone. Welcome to the session today. We're so glad to have you here. A few housekeeping announcements before we get started with today's session. On behalf of the California Labor Lab, which is a NIOSH Center of Excellence for Total Worker Health, it is our absolute pleasure to welcome you today. You are going to be muted during today's presentation, so if you'd like to ask a question, we welcome you to enter it into the online Q&A box, and we'll save time at the end to address as many questions as possible. This presentation is being recorded and will be made available on the California Labor Lab and Center for Occupational and Environmental Health YouTube page within the next 5 business days. And everyone who logged in with their registration email for the full live presentation today will receive an email tomorrow with a link to an evaluation form that will qualify you for a certificate of completion with 1 continuing education contact hour. Once the evaluation is completed, you'll be able to access and print your certificate. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to hand it over to Dr. Ed Yellen, who will be introducing our presenter for today.
Thanks, Michelle. And it is a distinct pleasure to introduce Cristina Banks, who will be giving today's webinar. I've known Chris now for 15 or 20 years, and she has had such a tremendous career. She's a proud Berkeley undergraduate, BA in psychology, and has a PhD in organizational psychology, University of Minnesota. She then went into consulting and academia both, and has a distinguished career in both. She taught for many years at the Haas School, and for a period of time was the director of their undergraduate program there. I've known her best in her role as the director of UC Berkeley's Interdisciplinary Center for Healthy Workplaces, and I've worked with her closely. She's the director of outreach for the California Labor Lab. California Labor Lab is devoted to understanding the impact of emergent working conditions on the welfare of the working age population. And most of our projects involve describing things that are, to say the least, adverse in their impacts. Chris, in the project she'll describe today, is focused on how can we get to a future that is not filled with problems, that is rewarding to the people who work there. And I think what's unique about this, because there are other future of work projects, is hers isn't restricted to what one discipline thinks about the future of work, but is integrative and takes the views of many of them and is trying to put it together in a systematic way. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Banks.
Thanks so much, Ed. And it's great to have such a superlative colleague all these years. I didn't realize it was that many, but you are an early adopter of the kinds of things we're going to talk about today. So I couldn't be more pleased to be here and talking about the Work Futures Initiative. And what I'm going to do today is I'm going to share some of the information that has come out of our work. I will be talking about what the whole initiative is, the 3 phases. And I will be actually channeling my best Kim Burns, because you will shortly see that a lot of what I'm going to be telling you actually comes from the actual words of the participants in this study. So let's get started, and I welcome your questions at the end of the presentation. So buckle your seatbelts. This is going to be fun. I want to first acknowledge the financial support that I'm getting from various places: the NIOSH Total Worker Health Center of Excellence, the California Labor Laboratory that Ed is the PI for, the Haas School of Business, in particular, the Institute for Business and Social Impact, and the Interdisciplinary Center for Healthy Workplaces, a partner with COEH in the School of Public Health at UC Berkeley. And I have no conflicts of interests. I want to introduce the leadership team that works with me on this project. There, you can see many people are here. It wouldn't be possible without the leadership team. And let me also add that almost everyone on this list is a volunteer, and they volunteered their time and effort across almost 2 years. So I thank them for everything that we have achieved to date. So my presentation is going to be a general description of the initiative. And to explain why are we doing this, I'll talk about the methodology we followed and the outcomes that are going to come from the initiative. I am going to go deep into what we learned from the Sandbox participants. And that's because what they said just blew us away. And the leadership team, every time we finished a Sandbox with our participants, our heads exploded. And that's because we heard things that we didn't know and we couldn't have imagined. And hopefully you will take that sentiment away too from the presentation today. I'm going to talk a little bit about what you can do with this information and also our next steps. So let me talk about a couple of things. Our aim is to create a new vision and framework for work, worker experience, and workplaces to promote both business success and worker health, safety, well-being, and productivity. Not a small project. This will occur in 3 phases. The first phase is a data collection, which I'm sharing with you today. It's accomplished through kind of a unique methodology called the Sandbox. We're going to integrate all the data we collect from the Sandboxes and create a comprehensive view of the current state of work, workplaces, and so on, and develop a new vision to build a better future state. And the mechanism we're going to use for that is called a mixer, which I'll describe a bit later on. And then once we know what our new vision and framework is going to be, then we are going to engage a set of change management experts to translate that vision into change management tools, which you can see are going to be various kinds, but it might be an integrated set of tools. And they'll form a community of change as change agents in order to build a pathway to the future. Why are we doing this? Yeah, I've been asked that a few times. The Work Futures Initiative was founded on the belief that we must actively shape the future of work, then have it shape us. Therefore, we need to reimagine the future to ensure that both business and people thrive. Meaningful change requires diverse perspectives, and all voices contribute to our collective understanding of work life. Convening professionals from a range of backgrounds gives us a more complete understanding of the forces that create healthy work environments. And we're going to do something that I think does not happen very often, and that is to really try to understand the whole picture. So here's a mnemonic that can help you follow what we're up to. We're going to do sandboxes, or actually we've completed them. We had 16 sandboxes, 163 participants. We're going to put together a 2-volume book series of what they said. Then the mixer will quickly follow. It will articulate the challenges and issues, and from that, we will create a new vision. And then finally, the summit is what we're going to convene with these change management experts to translate the vision and the framework into change management tools. And all of this will be distributed freely to the public. This is a timeline. I'm not going to go through it, but you can see that we started in 2023. We're going to finish up in 2026. Now let me talk about the sandboxes. So I said it was kind of a unique methodology. It's about bringing together experts who are senior, seasoned, reflective people in a particular occupational group in order to talk with each other about the current state of their occupation or stakeholder group and how they see the future. To do that, we issued personal invitations to participants based on referrals and based on what we understand in these various occupational groups in terms of who are really the people leading in each of these areas. We recruited 6 to 16 professionals per sandbox from the same occupational or stakeholder group. We invited them to participate virtually in a 2-hour lightly facilitated discussion with their peers. And based on what they told us, we ensured their confidentiality and removed their identity associated with their statements from all recordings. Biographical information was collected on all the sandbox participants, and they were sent to all of the participants. And participants in each sandbox, those bios were shared with everyone. So everybody in the 163 knew who everybody else was and what group they fell into. Participants were told at the beginning of the sandbox that discussion was critical, and we needed to hear what they think. We wanted them to be generous with their sharing and to spark off each other and to have fun with their discussions. Here are the different groups that we convened in the sandbox. We convened 18 sandboxes, 2-hour virtual discussions. We summarized them in 16 different sandbox summaries. We combined a couple of the sandboxes together where the content was essentially the same. And so in this presentation, I'm going to be focused on 7 of these 16, which I think would be most relevant to this audience. Each sandbox had a series of questions. And the idea was that these questions would be very general, would not be leading. They don't reflect an agenda. They're not out to confirm or disconfirm anything. And so I'm sharing these questions with you so you can see at the outset that we're not trying to steer a discussion in any direction. And as a consequence, we call the statements that were collected in the sandboxes as unfiltered voices. They were unfiltered in the sense they were not led or shaped or evaluated or changed in any way, any meaningful way. And we're going to let the voices speak for themselves. Okay, so we provided summaries of their sandboxes and access to all other summaries and bios to each participant. And they were invited to join a dedicated LinkedIn group so we can continue to be in contact with them. They will be provided with ebooks of all sandbox summaries and printed volumes upon request. We see these folks as a congress of 163 people from 18 different occupational and stakeholder groups. And even though it took about 60 invitations to collect up to 20 people to participate in a sandbox, at the end, the comments we got were very gratifying. They just said they've never been part of anything like this before, and they were very excited about being able to be a participant, and they had never talked to their own peers in this way. So we thank them for their contribution to this initiative, and obviously we couldn't do it without them. Okay, right, so my presentation is not moving. There we go. All right. So let me say a few things about what you're about to see. I am sharing a subset of Sandbox discussions instead of the full amount because it would be impossible. The summaries are quotes, not tabulations or analyses. And here are the Sandboxes I've chosen to talk to you about. So we're going to go through each of these 6 groups. And actually, there's 7 groups if you count CHROs as separate. And I am going to share what I believe are really important things for the audience to know. And the main point of looking across all these occupational stakeholder groups is to look across them, to be a boundary spanner, and to see how they intersect. How are they interconnected? How are they looking at the same things? How are they looking at it differently? How is something going to have a force on a lot of other occupational groups by virtue of what's happening in that group? This is very important in order for understanding where do we go. So just as a teaser, here's initial things to think about. We saw some common concerns, and these went across very diverse groups. And you'll see as I go through each of the occupational and stakeholder groups that we cover today, that these are general themes. Now, why is it important to talk about what's similar? Well, because if they have the same issues, they ought to be talking to each other and working together on how to deal with those issues. There's some uniqueness, and I've noted four things there, but there's much more that's unique than I listed here, but this is just a bit of a teaser. Okay, so why don't we go ahead and start reviewing what we learned, and this isn't all we learned, but some of the things we learned with each of the groups. So the first group I'm going to talk about is the occupational health and safety professionals. For those of you who aren't super familiar with this group, let me define it. Occupational health addresses all aspects of health, safety, and well-being in a variety of occupational settings, including the workplace. The field has a strong focus on primary prevention of hazards. Okay, knowing that, then let's talk about each of these items that I have listed here as points that were made by folks in this group. First, piecemeal approach. And it's best for me to tell you what they said in their words. So bear with me. Okay. One person said the human factors and ergonomics area brings a systems approach to integrating technology with a personal kind of subsystem, which consists of knowledge, skills, and abilities of the workers themselves. A systems approach integrates technology, training, the built environment, and the organizational structure. So it's a system structure is opposite to a piecemeal approach. Another said the piecemeal approach is just not going to work. You're going to end up with unintended consequences for changes that you make to fix one thing. The second issue about psychological safety and well-being culture is captured in the following quote. In places where it's been more successful in protecting workers and valuing workers is where there is psychological safety. Workers feel like they have a voice and there is communication. In other words, we hear you. And creating a culture to support well-being. This is hard to do when you're driven by profit. With respect to destigmatizing mental health problems, one participant said, a challenge and a thing that is not working is when we think about mental health. For the mental health of workers, so often we address this with individual behavior change, more yoga, more meditation, and not changing the actual work. Another said, as long as mental issues don't impact work, ... as long as you can keep building whatever it is, it's not a salient thing for your employer to worry about. It's sort of an invisible problem because management may think there's nothing wrong. Everybody seems to be working, but efficiency is degraded. A countermeasure was stated by another. A president of a construction company started a national movement to destigmatize mental health issues. And this is because the suicide rate within construction is 5 times the national average. He's given talks all over the country and the world, a TED Talk, and written a book. And hopefully this will work. Okay. With respect to ergonomics and safety and remote work, you're going to an office environment, you have the physical ergonomics, the work design, you have the corporate ergonomist there to be a resource, then you shift to remote work. So the occupational safety and health kind of protective bubble doesn't exist. This has to change. Okay, neglect of indoor air quality issues. This is really critical. One thing we've learned during the pandemic is indoor air quality in buildings, but we haven't applied what we learned to ensure good quality air. But despite pressure to create safer indoor environment, no changes have been made because there's no funding for that. From the infectious disease standpoint, we talked about what kinds of air quality fixes could happen for viruses such as MRSA, and fortunately has become less of a problem in the last 15 years. All those changes we talked about doing aren't being applied. The reason I mention that is because of a slow-moving catastrophe for the world, antimicrobial resistance. It's going to become enormous if you go to a workplace where you're going to either get wounded by the kind of work you're doing and get an infection that can't be treated, or you're going to be inhaling organisms that can't be treated. It's going to make workplaces incredibly dangerous. Going on, gig work and retirement. The workforce is aging, and I don't think we're quite prepared for the implications of what a lot of work of that in a lot of workplaces in terms of workplace safety and health. Going further, a person said, we're going to have a set of workers that have to work for all their lives because there's no infrastructure for the retirement unless they do it for themselves. But many of them don't have the wherewithal. That's why they're doing gig work. And finally, shortage of skilled trades workers. There's a severe shortage in the skilled trades, and yet, for the most part, parents and schools are pushing students to not go into the trades, to go to college. And many of them come out of college and struggle to find jobs because the supply of jobs and the supply of labor isn't well matched. You are seeing some pushback, more encouragement of people to go into the skilled trades, and that trend will continue. All right, let me go on to the occupational health psychologists. Occupational health psychology is an interdisciplinary subfield of psychology that examines the impact of psychosocial working conditions on the health and well-being of workers. Occupational health psychology applies behavioral and social science theories, principles, and evidence to understand sources of psychosocial issues and to protect, promote, and generally improve worker health, safety, and well-being. So let's talk about the issues they brought up. The first is conflicting interests across clients served. One person said they're serving 3 different stakeholders. For many people working in business schools, their clients want to know how to make more money. You have to make the case with healthier employees, you get more out of them. A second client is the people who are really servicing the worker and the working experience. And then the third group is a group that gathers knowledge for knowledge's sake, who need to understand the experience of work. These three different stakeholders often come in conflict. Trying to create a coherent agenda, it just doesn't happen. Work is a social determinant of health. Work is a gateway to so many good things, but the CDC has now recognized work as a social determinant of health. It's important to view it through that lens when it comes to how we're trying to solve big problems of society. The members of this group tend to highlight all the ways that work will kill us and are bad for us. But we have to be honest that work is a gateway to really critical psychological, social, and material resources that we can't get any other way. Mental health needs. What we have been doing hasn't been working anymore. It's the idea of throwing resources at individual employees and saying, here, go fix yourselves. Here are all the tools. Another said, if we can prove just one thing to make workplaces safer and healthier and affect employee well-being, it would be to ensure that all employees have ready access to healthy social support networks. Because we know without question that when we have someone to turn to, whether it be a coworker or boss or some other peer, then we'll be able to get someone's support when they need it. Okay, the need for belonging and connection. In response to the Surgeon General's report on isolation and loneliness, the focus of being able to create belonging and connection within the workplace is important. A webinar speaker acknowledged that that's important. While that's important, we also need to respect the different needs of belonging and connection outside of work. A lot of interventions we have are workplace focused, work related. And so now we need to pull back and think more about community-based, health, behavior-based models of what people are experiencing outside of work. Okay. Focus on the individual effort versus larger systems of work. There's a disconnect between workers and their managers. Managers say, you must come back to the office. You need to show up so many times a week. They manage by presence. If you're here, you're working rather than focusing on productivity outcomes. Are you doing it on time? For me, one of the biggest challenges is that we still have a model that is very much focused on the individual. A lot of what we know about productivity has to do with the larger systems of work. Design for the real people. I'd love to see some more attention spent on work design, how we design the job for real people. Actually tailor the work so it fits the individuals we bring on. And then finally, meaningful work compensates for paying less. If we're fulfilling your meaning, we're fulfilling your call and your purpose, and we can pay you less. And we see that across a wide variety of sectors. I think we're seeing that even within organizations where jobs that are more fulfilling might be paying less because you get the psychic pay, or we're asking you to do extra labor because it's fulfilling. I hope this is helpful. All right, corporate real estate. Now, one might wonder, why is corporate real estate part of this presentation and part of the sandbox? It's actually an incredibly important contributor, which I hope I can convey now. The field of corporate real estate focuses on the management of costs for real property used by a company for its own operational purposes, and on how it can add value to the core business and contribute to the overall performance of the organization. Given that that's their purpose, The current state doesn't meet occupant needs. Enterprises, another way of saying tenants, want extremely well-planned and executed workplace programs, but they don't invest to achieve occupants' needs. There is an emerging trend of more convenient work locations. During the pandemic, people moved away from work, and now workplaces are making moves to help them be in person where they are now in order to offer flexibility and choice. Okay, another person said humans are social creatures, and that is being overlooked. The default. Our current model of work structure, 9 to 5, 5 days a week, 365 days a year, is just a model. It can be made more seasonal, more natural. Another person said, a tectonic shift is happening, but we're only at the beginning. Commuting is still a problem. The initial reductions in commuting during COVID showed a marked decrease in emissions, but a post-pandemic distributed workforce, even with limited in-office time, appears to be moving back to pre-pandemic emission levels. Longer commutes after the pandemic could be responsible for the return to 2019 level of emissions. More convenient work locations could likely reduce commute lengths even post-pandemic. Privacy issues. Real and perceived privacy concerns are stalling improvements in the workplace. Now you might wonder, what's that got to do with corporate real estate? It's stalling, it appears to be stalling improvements because people are insisting on closed spaces. Potential fears around AI are privacy related, not unemployment related. And then another said, there is strong privacy concerns related to how people work away from the office. Team-based distributed work showed shortcomings. The challenge in a distributed work world is to continue to connect people to corporate culture while supporting their need for choice and autonomy. Distributed work tends to stay focused on projects and needs to find ways to let people socialize, bond, coach, mentor, and celebrate. Keeping team members connected socially and professionally over distance is a primary challenge. New metrics are needed. New metrics will be required to measure more human-focused aspects of work. Return on investment will still be critical, but new metrics will assess employee wellness, engagement, loyalty, contribution, personal development and growth. An industry-wide set of metrics could be established to enable comparison of organizations against each other. And then finally, workplace users' participation in design. One participant admits, we don't know what we don't know. So we should focus our energies on designing for resilience and human needs. Another said we should think like generalists, systems designers, rather than specialists. And another said we need an open feedback loop between workplace users, and they need to be empowered to make changes to be able to recreate the workplace to support dynamic and emerging needs. Okay, so hopefully you know a little bit more about the corporate real estate contribution. The next two are going to be directly relevant to, actually the next four are going to be directly relevant to how organizations run. We're first going to tackle the senior human resource management. Human resource management is the design and development of formal policies, practices, programs, and systems in an organization and other structures to help manage the organization's workforce and to support desired employee behavior. Okay, the first thing they said was off the charts expectations. For one participant, when I'm asked what an HR person can do in the organization, I think the expectations are really off the chart. and we're trying everything. We have talked about ownership in companies. Do people want the company to do more? Or do we tie them to the company less? Are we going to fully fractional and gig? Or are we giving ownership and equity deeper inside organizations? Little direction. There is tension underlying the need to be lean, be profitable, and shareholder return versus well-being of your employees. If you could show leadership the long-term impact and what it really means when we have turnover and absences that they hear about, I would love to see it. We continue to go round and round on this, and there's still a default to short-term mindset. Okay, one size fits all doesn't work. We're all just limping along right now. A one-size-fits-all approach does not work and lets down both the business and the teams. Leader by leader, having conversations, taking human-centric approaches, and building trust with your team members so that they feel like they can be transparent with you about what they need as far as work, that's a package deal, right? Another said, we had a future of work team that was working on redesigning our whole space. And I told them that the way we work and the way our physical space is arranged is very much for a 5 days a week in office situation. That's not where it's going. Let's figure out what we need to come together for and what we don't need to come together for, and just rethink everything. With respect to tension between profitability and employee well-being, part of the problem is that the CEO or COO fears that we're going to be judged for the way they are using facilities or our resources, and it's not necessarily what's best for the business. Okay, leadership, reading and implementing old scripts. Executives and professionals who are organizing their teams, organizing work, really are at a loss of what to do. I think they would welcome some guidance. I also think that there's some resistance and fear on their part. Even if we made a plan on how to make hybrid even more effective, there couldn't be any fear of loss of control, loss of productivity, all of those things. Another said, what we are seeing in the marketplace is CEOs and executives that don't know what to do with where we are and where we're going. And so they're just going to old scripts and their old ways of doing things and demanding people come back in the office and tracking badges, which is so offensive, and treating your employees psychologically and telling them work is prison. Experimenting with different models of operating. So this gives us some hope. In our organization, we are having conversations leader by leader, taking a human-centric approach and getting to know and building trust with your team members so that they feel like they can be transparent with you about what they need as far as work, flexibility, resources, mental and well-being, etc., making it team by team. Another participant offered, we set up region headquarters that are support centers. We got pushback initially on hybrid and committing to this, but the flexibility of hybrid is energizing the teams. And they want to be there when they are scheduled, and they don't have to drive or come to the office all the time. Closing the leader-employee gap. We found that we're able to measure trust with the different divisions in our organization, but where trust is low, complaints are high and turnover is high. That doesn't surprise anyone in HR, but for those business unit leaders, they're not thinking about it. The data are there, and there's something you can do to change that relationship. When a person files a complaint, they don't trust the leadership to do something about it. It's a cry for help. We're focusing on how you show up as a leader and how you develop trust and communicate. Okay, preparing the workforce for AI. Now, AI was a huge topic, and we're going to get into this pretty deep in a minute. There's a need for training and investment to get people up to speed and using technology in an appropriate way. We're going to have to train people first on now how to use it efficiently so that it's a value add to the bottom line. Another person said, I think there's enormous interest in AI, but there's a lot of emphasis on the technology part of it, on the ethics and on productivity. But there's a lot more elements to AI augmented workforce that we need to look at, such as how does it impact the need for health? How do you manage a team of bots and people? How do you fire a bot versus delegate to a human being? How do you pay for certain performance if one's work is augmented by AI? And finally, there's a lot of fear about technology, but I think we need to continue to celebrate what technology can do in helping us be more human. We aren't robots. Remote lessons. When leaders raise the 5 days a week thing again, they think they are going to have the buzz we had before the pandemic. Let me tell you, there was no buzz before the pandemic. I don't know what reality you are working in, but people were in the lab then, and half the time you didn't see people outside of it. They have some romanticized version of what it was like. And then finally, lean teams means understaffing. It's a business risk when you're too lean. And then when somebody burns out, God forbid, something happens to them, or they go to another organization. We had a situation where there was only one person doing the job. When that person left and a couple of people on that team left, everything fell apart. Every company is trying to get leaner, and so many things are falling by the wayside. It's productivity, but there's not a lot of time for development. There's not even a lot of time for management. Okay, those are the senior HR people. And I am going to go to the CEOs. Okay. What I want to share with you, the CEOs, the next two are about the forces that are coming down on work and workplaces. And I'm going to mention some things that are really important. And the first one is hope is not a strategy. That's pretty obvious. But many of the participants said that the CEOs don't have a clue about what to do, and the CEOs definitely demonstrated it. Okay, so one CEO said, we talk a lot internally that hope is not a strategy. It's good to have hope, but you can't really take that to the bank. As leaders, we have to be inspirational. We have to be authentic. People have to believe that we truly believe what we're saying. And so sometimes when you're trying to say what you think someone wants to hear, there's a pretty good chance you don't know what they want to hear. That's the world I live in. The best thing to do is listen and respond and try to be authentic. Old habits are hard to break. Okay. One of the challenges is that everyone in the Sandbox session that this person was in, of a certain generation where we grew up in the workforce, we were there 5 days a week. The younger generation wants to work from home, but they don't necessarily quite understand the impact, that they're also missing out on a tremendous amount of learning and development. Another person said, we've unleashed this remote work, so everyone, management and all your providers, just have to work a little harder now than ever. Than you've had to before to create that learning and development. It's a lot more intentional and it's a lot more sophisticated than it's ever been. Okay, the impact of remote work and isolation. There are no answers. There may be a correlation, if not causality, with the social isolation and remote work, with people being less engaged socially, not reading physical social cues. I think that's actually driving hostility. Okay, better when together. A lot of other companies out there are looking for the answer to remote work policies, and there's no one answer. And sometimes that goes over well, sometimes it doesn't go over well. Another person said the connection task that you have with people not being together and the costs in terms of weak ties and innovation. We know that it's tough to get those water cooler moments with remote companies. Okay, one thing about this conversation, a person said, that I don't think is talked about enough from an employee perspective is this move of companies that had to go remote and that they are trying to figure out how to get everybody back. It's the cost impact on employees themselves. I don't see companies that say everybody should come back, and by the way, here's your extra $15,000 a year. We're adding to your pay to compensate for those costs. Now, on the other hand, they didn't get their salary reduced at the beginning of this whole thing either. So there's both sides of it. But I do think that a part of the employee resistance comes back when you think of childcare costs and commuting costs and all that stuff. Okay, AI as disruptor. AI is going to be a massive disruptor to how we work. And I think it's got some positives, but I also think it has challenges as well. If we're getting the lower levels of our workforce because we're replacing them with AI, then those who are actually managers, it's probably going to get more exclusive. It's probably going to be guys in the Ivies and who knows who. So if I'm going to hire a senior executive, it's probably going to be a blue chip person who's in the network. And so I think there's going to be some real societal disruption potentially if we aren't really thoughtful about this. Okay, I want to skip down to the power of culture because they spent a lot of time on this issue. In our world, there's very little you can do to have an employee stay forever. They have the ability to move to other places, to move to other directions, up and lateral. And as leaders, you can't obsess over something that you can't change. So how do you work with that? How do you understand that and deal with it? I think how you quickly reinforce culture and internal processes so that it does not become onerous on either side. The people joining or the people training the people joining is going to be important. Another said, the bigger gestalt to me is the cultural overlay and how does it feed in and how do you build a strong, vibrant culture given hybrid work. And the last thing I want to mention about CEOs is that what I look for in people now is changing a lot. I'm not valuing extremely high. I'm now valuing extremely high emotional intelligence, way more than even some technical skills. And I'm also valuing curiosity and speed of movement way more than I did 10 years ago, because I find that those people have the attributes that will help navigate this crazy stuff we've talked about. And finally, I have to tell you about investors. What's important about this one is that these are the people who are actually changing organizations and changing the landscape of business. We were interested in talking with investors, the people who give millions of dollars to startups and small enterprises to scale up and build, because they're betting on the future being a certain way or wanting to create a future that serves them. So with that, I want to talk about what they talked about. And there's a very important aspect that has to be talked about. Let's talk about work arrangements. All right, so they entered into this conversation about, how much should people be working? So one said, researchers studied the 4-day week where 245 businesses were evaluated, over 88,000 workers. When the study was done, only 20 out of 245 companies went back to a 5-day week from a 4-day week. And they found that the 4-day week was just as productive as a 5-day week. And employees had less stress and they had more time. Many companies who said, we want you to come back to work, and the employees are saying, no, we won't. And so there's a huge fight going on. The crisis is with the employees at the highest levels. It's not about the hourly employee or the trades. It's not about the people who know how to do something. It's the people that make decisions on what to do. Those people are not coming. The future value of skills and experience. I find this frightening. We have to move away from an experience-based hiring and categorizing of work. And we have to move to a skills-based taxonomy, because the experiences we had in those labels just don't mean anything anymore. It's hard to evaluate people's skills in today's world based on what they did yesterday. Task skills that are typically required in a lot of jobs, especially the non-trade jobs like professionals, go away rapidly with AI. What stays? Transferable skills, the soft skills that we require around collaboration, communication, etc. The research shows the youngest generation is worse at those skills than ever. We have talked about culture and alignment and how important that is for bringing people together. But what I want to tell you about is agentic technology. What happens when very soon each person is not only themselves, but also their agent? So when you hire, it's proprietary. Someone has his own digital twin, or whatever you want to call it, a partner that is yours. So when I hire you, I hire not only you, but I have to evaluate your proprietary set of historical questions you've ever asked and shaped that you bring with you to the job. And I can't go and buy it anywhere. It's built over years. So you have decades of experience embedded in all your questions, and it's embedded in your agent. So what are you hiring? Another person described agentic technology. I see where this is going. It's not tomorrow, it's today. We have a tsunami that's hit. We have an existential crisis. Kids are coming out of school and are not getting jobs. Universities are full of people that are going to be unemployed. Unemployment rates are going to soar. There's going to be radical restructuring of everything that looks like work in so many different ways that talking about this other stuff feels like rearranging the chairs on the Titanic. The bottom line is that there's going to be, as this person said, in addition to the normal dislocation in the work world, we're going to have massive challenges in the social world that are going to get much worse as employment crisis is going to hit us. And we are going to have a lot of people who are unemployed, and I think we're going to have to readdress issues of universal income. There's a lot that's going on here, and I think there's going to be massive social disruption at levels we've never seen before. Okay. At this point, we have several takeaways, but they're obvious. The last one is the most important. We need all hands on deck now to figure this out. Our next steps are this mixer in order to create the new vision, but we're going to have to knit all these things together, and the summit to develop the change management tools that will get us out of this situation. So thank you for listening to my presentation, and I welcome a few of your questions. Ed.
Great. So I'll start with there's one that was put in the Q&A and said, great work and great presentation. Is this work related to with Industry 5.0? Not, I strongly recommend to consult Industry 5.0 to redefine the future of work. Thank you again for sharing this wonderful study.
So does it relate to 5.0?
Industry 5.0.
Industry 5.0. It obviously has a part in that, but it goes further than that. When you add in agentic technology where individuals will be represented by a digital twin, literally the sum of your life, everything you've done that's scraped from the internet and anything you wrote or said, and that is what is up front, that is what we've got to really think about. And the other is, whatever you're expert at now, it's not going to be that important. It's not going to be that valuable because you can find it in AI anywhere.
So I'd like to ask a general question. Obviously, many of the disciplines addressed in one way or another remote work. So that plays a part, but there have been other changes. So had you done this project in 2019 rather than 2023, 4, and 5, how would it have differed? And to what extent is that difference the result of the pandemic and its impact on remote work?
Yeah, well, let me start by saying the pandemic woke people up to a lot of issues that were already there in 2019. And for folks who are really trying to emphasize the importance of health, well-being, and safety of employees, this is the good news. And given that it's creating greater awareness and greater understanding of how important it is, because people have really suffered through the pandemic and after that. Now, throw in AI, totally different conversation. And the insistence that people want the personal freedoms that remote work affords or hybrid work affords, that genie's not going to go in the bottle. So yes, there are basic changes that happen as a function of the pandemic that have really changed how we look at things. Now, would it have changed my work? It didn't, because I've been really adamant about how important it is to look across disciplines and capitalize on the knowledge and intelligence and understanding of how each of these disciplines affects work, worker experience, and workplaces, and ultimately their health and well-being. That's been there from the beginning. Now there's a lot more urgency that is fueling the direction we're taking, but also hoping to spill over into a lot of work that will advance changes to actually help people in our nation.
So there's one more question in the chat. We're at 12:59, so have to be a quick answer. I'll just precede the question by saying this has been a fascinating project and a fascinating presentation, and I wish you well on trying to get disciplines to speak to each other, because it don't often happen. So the question that's in the Q&A is, if your knowledge isn't as important as your social skills, what's more important, knowledge or social skills in the emerging or future workplace?
Well, they're saying it's the social skills, because your knowledge can be pulled up at will on through your agent or through AI. It's an unknown frontier.
Great. And with that, we've reached 1 o'clock. Thank you very much, Christina, for a fascinating talk and a very important project. And we look forward to the next 2 phases, the mixer and the summit. And thank the audience. You retain the audience to a tremendous degree. And bye-bye. See you on November 5th, where we'll talk about another episode in the series about the future of work. We will present from the California Work and Health Survey. So bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.